Here, and I am issuing an emergency broadcast today for those in Canada and in many other places in the world, but mostly Canada, as we go into these new decrees ordered through the Emergency Planning Act. And this is incredibly important for every Canadian and American as well to know, because things are about to step up and people need to either go to the mountains and then stock up on long-term supplies and foods, or get the hell out of Canada. As this says, Alberta's overwhelmed ICUs nearly capacity, nonsense, military support being deployed. And we're seeing the same thing happening in Ontario, up to 3 military teams to be deployed in Ontario hospitals to deal with in the Emergency Planning Act, which going forward, we are going to see unbelievable levels of martial law and tyranny, the likes of which we've never seen before. And this is incredibly important to go into today, which is why I'm going to go through the act itself real quick and explain what it means for all of you and how they've been planning for this as they replace the nurses in the hospitals and the doctors in the hospitals with the military. This is only going to get worse, and we're going to go into that and more today. Everyone I know in Canada, including my family members, and I am pissed because what we're dealing with here are not reasonable people. A lot of people would like to have the hopium, like, oh, well, you know, we're having protests here and there. They are prepared for what comes next. Don't think otherwise. As this says, province of Saskatchewan, and again, this is being copied and put out throughout Canada, and its original name was the Wars Act, but of course, that doesn't sound as nice anymore. So it's all about just the declaration of emergency. As it says, province of Saskatchewan, minister's orders, by order of Lieutenant Governor of Council 465/2021, dated September 13th, 2021, a declaration of emergency has been made for the province of Saskatchewan. 18 and 18.1 of the Emergency Planning Act provide in part as follows, and this is what they are going to do, and I'll explain it. Powers of minister in an emergency, 18.1. It says, on the making of an emergency declaration or a renewal of an emergency declaration and during the emergency period, the minister may, and by the way, by his own discretion, put into operation any emergency, which everyone should be very much concerned by. And now we go down to B. So the rest is pretty much open season. Authorize or require a local authority to put into effect any emergency plan for the municipality. Getting into C, assume direction and control of the emergency response of a local authority. Picture Australia on steroids, my friends. And then moving on, D, acquire or utilize any real or personal property that the minister considers necessary to prevent, combat, or alleviate the effects of an emergency. So what they're saying in D here, and this is extremely important, is they now have control over your private property. Your house is no longer yours. Your phone is no longer yours. Your laptop is no longer yours. Nothing in your home is yours anymore. Now, one might say that sounds like communism. It is, but it's being tied to technocracy, to the social credit system. And what else is your property? Your body. Your bodily autonomy is your property. It's the most important piece of your property. And with this, they can essentially take you away and put you where they please because it's under an emergency. It's because they need to, because, oh, to keep everyone safe. That's what they will say. So this authorizes them to do whatever the hell they want. Moving on to E, and this will all come together here. Authorize any qualified person to render aid of a type that the person is qualified to provide. Let me say that again. Authorize any qualified person to render aid of a type that the person is qualified to provide. So, say you're a doctor. Remind you of anything. If anyone has ever seen the movie Dr. Zhivago, or better yet, read the book Dr. Zhivago, it takes place in Soviet Russia after the fall of the Tsar. And they take Dr. Zhivago, steal him from his family, who he doesn't see for many, many years after that, and forces him to apply medical care to military who are tyrants and ravaging the countryside, killing farmers, murdering people. This is straight out of Stalinist Russia. It's almost like they copied and pasted it, all under the guise of an emergency. Let's move on here. F, control or prohibit travel to or from any area of Saskatchewan. And again, this is going to be in the rest of Canada and the US soon, and I'll explain that in a moment, because they do have the emergency authorization in the US. But if we are looking at controlling or prohibiting travel, what did I say early last year? They would be shutting down county to county in the US and province to province and even district by district in the US with checkpoints. They already had it in New York City for tolls, and they would, that was just the warm up. And then they would use those booths. You won't be able to travel anywhere. This will be shutting down your ability to go. You go through downtown, well, you're in Saskatoon or Regina, or maybe you're in another province, or in Winnipeg, or you're in Vancouver or Toronto. Well, good luck getting neighborhood to neighborhood without being a complacent coward. And this also risks your family. Your children want to play with friends and wander around. No wandering around, only allocated travel where the government says you can or cannot travel. And this is perfectly going into the fact that they have fired all these nurses and doctors, and now they're replacing them with military. This is martial law without an end. Now let's move on to G. Provide for the restoration of essential facilities and the distribution of essential supplies. Now, they will take over stadiums like they did during Hurricane Katrina and use them for whatever means necessary. Now, they're not going to be used because ICUs are full. They're going to be used as quarantine facilities. This is what Jade Helm was years ago with Walmart and all these other entities, using them as facilities, using them as camps. This is what the FEMA camp, so-called conspiracy theory, was about for all these years. Now it's coming to fruition. It's right there in the government documentation. And the distribution of essential supplies, which means, oh, you're trying to make a living with your store, selling goods and services? We're going to seize those goods and services. You will get nothing, just pittance, and we will redistribute it. That's communism and technocracy. That is a level of tyranny that we haven't seen in Canada as of yet, or the United States as of yet. And we're starting to see it creep up on people in Australia. And we've seen it for many years in China. And we've seen it for many years throughout the Soviet Union and other communist hellholes. Oh, but it's all for the greater good of the greater number. That's what they said back then too. This is why I said this was a red alert video, my friends. Let's move on to H. Provide law enforcement. Beat you with a club over the head for walking outside. And other essential services in any part of Saskatchewan. Again, forcing doctors into work when they don't want to. Forcing different government workers, bureaucrats, to work in different services as if it's wartime. Very, very, very concerning to see such an enforcement. Let's get to I. Cause the evacuation of persons and the removal of persons or livestock and personal property from any area of Saskatchewan that is or may be affected by an emergency, and make arrangements for the adequate care and protection of those persons or livestock and of personal property. Let's see what that means. Well, that means put you in a camp. That means go to the farms and disrupt the supply chain, because guess what prolongs the emergency? The destruction of the supply chain. When the supply chain goes down, you have an emergency, and you have desperation and starvation, which means you have compliance and servitude. Same thing as using inflation for debt. Push people into a corner and force them to beg their enemy for help.